I sent out all the actual documents, but I'm going to get us hard copies as well, because then we can write on them, because I think that piece is, do you know, I think it's really important. It's not just a digital copy that you can't interact with. And on the agenda, I tried to create it so that there was enough space in between the items so you could take notes. Let's see. So I just want to make sure that, and I knew that, and when I emailed all the documents out, I'm pretty clear that, you know, there's some people who couldn't come just for as far as the travel and the weather. You know, Utah is very strange because sometimes it snows in April and then sometimes it's foggy and you can't land. Like I was thinking, oh my God, our colleague from Washington flying in, I thought, oh, they're going to divert her to Boise and she's going to be stuck in Boise or Durango or something like that. But that didn't happen. So I just want to welcome you, and I think we're going to start with, again, something positive. And I always do that intentionally. It's not necessarily that I'm always delivering bad news, but it's challenging news, right? So I think we just have to be, I'm not a person that lives in denial. I just want it to be direct and clear, transparent. Everybody knows what's going on, so you don't have to be guessing. Because I think the not knowing is way more stressful than knowing things that are going on, frankly. So I'll just, you know, I'm Christelle Estrada, and I'm still in this position, so I don't know. And I think for me, the most positive experience, and usually I talk about my dog because it's a rescue, and it helps with blood pressure. I don't need as much blood pressure medicine because I have my dog. But I'm going to talk about people in this agency who make a huge difference in the quality of my experience being here. And I'll just talk about two people. So the first one is in educational equity, and that's Momi Tua. She's not only competent, knows the law, and is very committed to civil rights, but is kind and generous. And that makes all the difference in the world. So that's one person who really kind of keeps me going. The other person is Brian Quisenberry, who's the Assistant Attorney General. And the reason Brian keeps me going is when I find out issues related to law at the federal level. It's easy to text him and say, okay, so this is what I actually found out. Can you research it for me? And like he does it right away. And so we have an advantage of having an Assistant Attorney General because he's the one who did the waiver presentation and the injunction to help us, you know. So are we transmitting or no, Jerry? Yeah. I think, no, that's okay. I can do it. If I get stuck, I'll scream in the microphone and tell you to come up or something. I don't know, something like that. So those two people in particular, so Momi Tua and Ed Equity, we do a lot of work together, and Brian Quisenberry. So we're kind of like a really interesting threesome that work together in a way that is not, you know, sometimes assistant attorney generals and lawyers tend not to be as compassionate as Brian is. And so we're really lucky to have someone like Brian. So I just want to, so next time you see him, if, you know, you do see him or you see him in the hall, you know, just say thank you to him because he's a really great guy. Okay, so when we go around, just say your name, where you're from, and something that you're really grateful for. Could be colleagues, your own colleagues, something in your personal life. You know, could be a pet. Pets are always good to talk about. So we're going to start with, so make sure you say your name, and obviously you're Title III, but if you're in a district where you're over all federal programs, you know, which ends up being pretty challenging, if you know what I mean. And it's even challenging if you're over Title III and somebody else is over all the other federal programs. That might be even worse. I mean, I don't know. So, anyway, Jeanette.
I'm Jeanette Christensen from Cache County School District, and I'm the ESL Migrant Homeless Coordinator for Cache County, so have that Title III portion. I brought my counterpart who's going to be over federal programs. She's over Title I at the moment. And I'm grateful for life. I love to just live and enjoy what I do and enjoy life and enjoy people and love being with my kids and grandkids and someday keep looking back at the pet issue because we had them and now I want them again. So anyway, that's me.
I'm Robin Clement, like she said, from Cache County School District, and I really like working with nice people. I just love it.
I'm Arlene Anderson from South San Pete School District, and they call me the program director, so I have several programs, but all the federal, and it goes on, but I love it. It's never the same any day of the week or any hour sometimes. And what I'm grateful for, I just got back from a conference in Texas, and we used to live there, and I'm grateful for my family, but I'm grateful for friends who become family, and it was so neat to reconnect with so many wonderful people that we love. So, thank you. Oh, I was going to pass it down.
I'm Dinah Scott, and I'm the ESL specialist from the Washington County School District. I'm the one who came up from St. George. And I'm grateful for my supervisor, Randy Richardson. He's so knowledgeable about all the federal programs, and he really helps us with compliance. So it's nice to work with a supervisor who's so competent.
She's our frequent flyer. So, thanks. Nice to have you here.
Okay, I'm Megan Navarro, secondary specialist in the ALS department at Alpine School District, and I'm grateful for so many things. Wonderful coworkers that I get to come and associate with every day, as well as my family. I can say that now. My family of 3. I just had a baby about 7 weeks ago, our first one.
Congratulations!
So grateful that everything went well with that, and I'm also grateful more these days for sleep than I ever have been.
I'm Jerry Merkley, ALS Director in Alpine, and I am so grateful that maternity leave is over and that she's back.
Good morning. My name is Charlene Louie. I'm the Director of Educational Equity in Granite School District, and with that, majority of my job is Title III. I'm grateful today for family. Just recently, we celebrated my mother's life of 94 years, and she recently passed away, and we just got back from Hawaii yesterday from Burring for having services for her and saying goodbye finally. But with family just comes a lot of memories, and that's what we all live for, is family, I think.
You mean it's not compliance for...
No.
I'm Rhonda Bickmore, and I'm from Ogden City School District. I'm the Cultural Linguistic Diversity Specialist there. And I am very grateful for family also, and for days off where we get to play with our families.
Good morning. I'm Mark Hansen from the Davis School District. I handle the ELL assessment and data portion of our program. And I'm also grateful for really great coworkers. It just makes it so nice and gratifying to come to work every day, to work with great people.
Hi, I'm Connie Ziegler from Davis School District. I work part-time as an ESL coordinator, and I also am at an elementary school. And I'm really grateful for my coworkers, and especially my DOCSI family, my principal and the secretary and all the students at the elementary school. They're just wonderful to work with.
I'm Bernardo Villar. I'm over federal programs and educational equity in Davis School District, and these are amazing coworkers to work with. Grateful for life and everything that it brings. That's what I'm grateful for.
My name is Annalise Caratini Ruiz. I'm the Title III Administrator for Canyon School District, and I am grateful for getting part of my life back. This coming summer, I'll be finishing up my coursework in my doctorate program, which has been long, a long journey. So looking forward to that.
I'm Betty Jimenez. I'm the ALS coordinator for Salt Lake City School District. I'm grateful for my stepdaughter because she keeps me going when I don't feel like going. So.
I'm Sandra Buendia, the director over ALS, as well as director over Focus Schools. So I do have two hats to fill. I'm grateful for our superintendent having faith in my ability to do the work that needs to be done in our district related to English learners and being back in a position that I'm passionate about. So I'm excited.
Okay, so thank you. Make sure that you have your agenda. It's on the back there because then you'll be able to take notes and see. And remember, this is being streamed and recorded. And then I sent out all the documents because I knew that travel might be challenging for people. So thank you for people who came from, San Pete and other places and Cache. And this is going to be... Okay, so most of you know that my goal is to be completely transparent about what's going on, because the best thing is that you know, right? And you can be advocates either in your own agency, in your own role, and also with stakeholders, because that's really important, especially those who are the most disenfranchised. So if you look at the agenda where it says status of ESSA, I did a webinar and went over just the feedback from Title III, which was, thanks to all of you and the work group and everything that we did, incredibly positive, very positive. And so we didn't have to make any changes. There's one section in the peer review that I'm going to hand out and we're going to go over and talk a little bit about. Because I think it brought up a really important issue. Title I is another issue, okay? And I'll tell you the 3 reasons, okay? Just so we can be clear. So the first one was what the Fed said about us not responding to the statute. And in the statute, it's pretty clear about how the state is going to address the disproportionate allocation of teachers in high poverty schools. So inexperienced teachers, ineffective teachers, and you have to make it public. So it's similar to the No Child Left Behind, but it doesn't use the highly qualified language. Remember when you have to send out letters and all that? But it's really about making public issues related to disproportionality and the disadvantages for poor children. Okay, so that's an important issue. Okay, and in this room, we're not naive to think it doesn't exist for lots of systemic issues. And we'll talk a little bit about that afterward. I'll give you a chance to talk to each other. The second issue is in the statute, it's really clear that the accountability system has to be for all schools. You can't have a separate accountability system for alternative schools. Now, we can talk about kind of the logic of that in relationship to sometimes comprehensive high schools in particular deciding that they have some students that they don't want to be accountable for. So they refer them. And we've seen some patterns. I'm just going to be honest about it. We'll see some patterns that happens when students who are the most vulnerable and end up being challenging to an established system of schooling are referred to alternative schools after the October 1 count for enrollment or right before SAGE testing. I'm just telling you the truth. So, and then of course there was the 95% testing. So I'll tell you how we dealt with that. First of all, because of the statute in relationship to, we got all of this in December, and on December 29th, we were supposed to create a response and then send back. Okay, so that wasn't going to happen. So we asked for an extension, and the revisions were sent yesterday. Now, you can stop me at any time. Okay. So we had committees. So the first committee was the issue in relationship to effective teachers. When we brought this up to the board, well, let me just say that, so there was one, so what we decided when we brought the feedback to the board, we had committees. So Diana Sudworth, because teaching and learning is over Title II, okay, which is teacher effectiveness and, all that kind of stuff. So Diana Sudworth was in charge of that, and they had a committee, and they were working very clearly to bring some issues to bear. And her presentation is available on the, if you go to the board and the board meeting for ESSA, it'll say that, and it was to the full board, and it was the last board meeting in February. So you can actually see her presentation, which was, quite exceptional, because it was solving this issue. I won't go into details about it because you can actually see it, and if you want more, if you want more information about it, I can send it to you. I don't have access to the final draft that we sent yesterday, but I could actually ask Diana, right? So you can actually look at it, because I think that's the other thing that you have to deal with when you're talking to teachers and administrators around evaluation systems, because charter school evaluation systems by statute are different than ours. Okay. The second question was alternative schools, and so I was on that committee, and Leah, the assistant superintendent, Voorhees, was in charge, and we had representatives from charter schools, alternative schools, someone who is the president of the Alternative School Association, who was very helpful. We had Erin Bruff and Anne-Michelle Neal, who is not only over WIDA, but is also the accountability specialist, and did some modeling of data to help us make sure that alternative schools weren't put in, a terrible situation where they're always designated as F schools, right? And I can send, and she presented that, and there were a lot of questions related to it. Based on a particular contingency in the board that focuses on individual rights for choice. Okay. But I think the solution that we came up with and the way in which we honored what alternative schools do provide for students who don't really fit the traditional comprehensive high school system was, a really good solution. It didn't disadvantage the alternative schools, but it didn't keep them separate from the general accountability system. So I think, it came out to be, even though most of the board's questions were related to that. The 95%, when we actually now have data that those who opt out are, so which groups of students? Is it the most disadvantaged kids? No. Okay, so that was handled by the superintendency. So it ended, and Darren, who is the new assessment director. Now, the options provided previously for the board was non-compliance, because the argument was made about state sovereignty in relationship to federal statute. Okay, so when they worked on it, and Darren worked on it with a group and then came back, he provided different options, and he did a PowerPoint, and I'll send all those 3 PowerPoints to you, because it helps you to be knowledgeable Otherwise, you, as well as the schools, will have no idea why we're in this situation. So our plan hasn't been approved, and I think we're we're in good company with California. So California wasn't approved, and a couple of other states. So it's about 5 states that haven't been approved. And so what was presented to the board was the waiver, that we were going to ask them for a waiver to not abide by the 95%. Even though when we were on the telephone call from the feds, and I wasn't invited. The reason I wasn't invited was because there was no issue with Title III, but I barged in anyway. So, that's what I do. And what are they going to do? Tell me to leave? Anyway. And it was pretty clear that when this issue came up, and there were several other issues related to Title I, that it was a non-negotiable. It was in the statute, and it was a non-negotiable. So the board voted to ask for a waiver. So there are actually legal issues related to that. One is, from one point of view, legal point of view, you can't really ask for a waiver unless you have the plan approved. And then the second thing is the preemption law. So based on the Constitution in relationship to federal statute taking preemption over state statute is an argument of common sense. If it's a common sense approach that actually supports the intention of the federal statute, right? There were people in the board, and I would recommend that you listen to the discussion because I think it is really, really important. 5 voted, there was a unanimous vote for the waiver, but 5 voted totally against ESSA. So that's 5 of 15. So let's just, so do you want to ask any questions, or do you want to talk to each other first about any of those 3 issues? Because I think that's the other issue. The one was effective teachers, right? The disproportionate amount of first-year teachers in high-poverty schools. One was alternative schools, and then the other one was the 95%, which there isn't much, it's not like we can have a big discussion about that. We could actually do a data analysis and show people that, the students who are opting out aren't the kids who are, being supported by supplemental funding. So what questions do you have? Or do you want to talk amongst yourselves? I mean, it's fine. And then, because this is a lot to process, I think, I don't know. It seems a lot to process. And the other thing is the implications for you all. Because that would mean that the 2018 budget, if you don't have a plan, I don't know. So what do you want to do? You want to just have a conversation and look at those 3 issues, and then we'll come back. And so why don't you just kind of brainstorm and talk with each other, and you can talk about the whole thing about effective teaching and what happens in your own district, alternative schools maybe in your district, and forget the 95% because that's really a non-negotiable. But those other 2 elements or anything else related to it. Why don't you talk for about 2 or 3 minutes about those issues? And Wade, you can chat with our southernmost person. Okay, so what questions? Okay, so let's talk about either your observations or comments, or what questions do you have? Yeah.
One of our questions was, so did you say that you rewrote those concerns and resubmitted the plan, or?
Did you?
Well, I didn't.
Well,
but
yeah, but it was, and so we were wondering, how was that rewritten? Like, what was, you don't want to be on.
Well, my assumption, this is my assumption. The question is, how was it rewritten? Because it was submitted yesterday. Well, resubmitted yesterday.
Okay.
So I have no idea how all I know is based on the groups. So Diana Sudworth presented hers, and it was accepted by the board. Mm-hmm. And that was about, which we'd have to look and see specifically, mm-hmm. what her recommendations were and then how it was included. The second one, so that was effective teachers, disproportionate number of effective teachers. The second one, in relationship to alternative schools, I was on the committee, and so I actually know the criteria, because it's like, it would be like this initial analysis used so that all the accountability system for all public schools is aligned. And then the second analysis would be what alternative schools use as well. And then there would be like a ranking that would be in some way fair to alternative schools. So I don't know how that language was put in there, but I know that that was the result of that. The 95%, because the board unanimously voted to ask for a waiver, obviously, I don't know how it was written in there, but the waiver was asked for. So all the details, because I haven't actually seen what was submitted yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions or comments about any of these three issues? Comments, concerns, insights, queries? Annalise.
We were just wondering, what is the possibility of having some sort of update or status that superintendents could send to our districts, so they're not wondering or thinking that we don't know what we are to do. In terms of ESSA, we've been speaking about ESSA and giving a heads up for 2 years now. And so I think you'll be at this critical point in time to send an update of where we're at, and that will come from our superintendents to everybody else.
So I'll actually email that recommendation to the superintendency here. So what? Yes. Jeanette.
That would help us in the support for some of those things that we're trying to do at the district level. We saw a huge increase of our Hispanic students opting and wanting to go to our alternative high school, which sometimes the alternative high school meets their needs and sometimes it does not. And so we've kind of implemented that, myself or whoever's, doing the ESL and the SPED director be included in those SAT team meetings where we're talking about students, including the student. There's been several who they were informed the morning they show up at school, you're going to the alternative high school, and nobody had talked with them. That's disconcerting in lots of ways. But so that would give us strength as we're looking at these alternative things. If our superintendent's here, we're looking at that, that's an issue, and then strengthen our aspect with our individual principals to strengthen that so that we can use our alternative high schools are great and provide a great need, but we want them used appropriately.
So this is the thing that's really important, because since I'm on that committee, so here's another thing that you should think about. If you want to be on that committee, because there are other things that haven't been completely resolved. I mean, we've resolved it in relationship to the accountability system and the secondary system. But these practices, about before SAGE, all of a sudden an alternative school gets, 50 kids, and, they actually go to their home high school and they're told they don't go there anymore without any notification to parents or whatever. I mean, these kinds of examples are, pretty, awful for lots of reasons. But if you should let me know, and you can do it on your feedback sheet. If you want to be a member of the Alternative Schools Committee that I'm on, I'm not sure there's going to be an extension of the effective teacher. I don't know how that's going to be constructed. But does anyone want to talk about the issue in relationship to not only effective teachers, but the way in which licensing is being changed? In one of the preliminary board rules, everything that has required coursework is eliminated and replaced with competency. Does anyone want to say anything about? That's as yet to be determined. And if you want an update on I'm not on that committee, but there's a committee that focuses on competency-based approaches to licensing, to diplomas. I could ask for an update because I'm not involved in that, but I think it's a really critical issue if that's being taken out of the board rule, like required coursework. Rhonda.
How do you show competency in classroom management?
Okay, so these are all really good questions and I have no answer to.
So I guess that's probably a comment that I want to make, and is, well, first of all, I want to thank you for keeping us informed. This document is significant, nebulous, and even with the information that you've provided, there's a lot of cloudiness, and I guess I feel like I'm shooting in the dark, and I apologize. As I said that, I apologize because of relation to yesterday's incident. That's probably inappropriate, so I apologize. I didn't intend to offend anyone. But it's every day trying to negotiate and navigate through this cloudiness. And at some point, I'd like to know, either have access to or be informed of these changes, because it's a huge impact on a lot of levels, and the depth and complexity is pretty significant. And I'll email and ask for more information and not always get it. And about the only person who really provides any clarity, and I know that it's limited based on what the limited information you have is from you. So I want to thank you personally, but I just feel like, can you please, direct me to where I can have access to the information so that I'm informed, so that I can engage in informed conversations with the key people in our district who are the decision makers, as well as keep families informed.
Yeah. No, I think this is the other issue in relationship to the responsibility of the state educational agency. I mean, the responsibility of the state educational agency is to ensure that there's clarity in relationship to, it's not just about compliance, right? It's really about the way in which we serve children and those families and children who are the most disadvantaged in Utah. That's really the point, and so then the question ends up becoming, if you look at your supplemental funding, related to, it's something like $150 million, right, in all the title programs. And think about the way in which you use those funds to support students who are the ones who need it the most. I mean, that's the point. That's the point of the 1965 legislation under Johnson, when there was actually some kind of moral conscience related to poverty, right? So I think these things are really, really critical, and it's easy for me to bring it up in a way that would be constructive. So one way would be, which would be easy, I think, is to actually go to and I can do it for you and then send it out, all the PowerPoints that are actually on the website for that board meeting that have the explanations, I'll send it to you. And then you should give it to everybody in your district. You should give it to everybody, because this is not just, this is the other issue. This is not just an issue of federal programs. People like to, in some ways, make it that way, or ALS directors, or, and then the people who are the most connected to the neediest families then are disenfranchised in the district, right? From the curriculum department or from the assessment department. Okay, so that doesn't makes no sense at all, right? So in some ways we can turn this around and say, here are the issues that needs to be addressed. The same thing with employment policies and talent development. You can't really, if the only way in which teachers end up being in high poverty schools is they're the youngest and the least experienced, how can that be conscionable? And that's based on lots of things. Like, what is that based on? It's based on seniority. It's based on staffing criterias. It's based on which teachers, the parents who want their kids to have because they have AP. I mean, you know that. I've been in a high school. I was a high school principal. And so then the question is, this is a systemic issue. It's not just about federal programs. And that's the thing we all have to recognize. So, Jerry, if you're listening, I'm going to ask you to come back up because I want to put something up on the board. Anything else related to this? Because I'm actually going to give you the Title III peer review comments. And then, because remember, in the peer review comments, you don't really have to respond to them. You only have to respond to what the Department of Education has said in relationship to the statute, right? But I think the 4 peer reviewers brought up something really incredibly important. And so I'm going to give you what the peer reviewers said, and then I'm going to give you how I adjusted that in the Title III program to try to mitigate the segregation that districts feel when they're in the ALS department and you have the curriculum department over here and the assessment department over there. So I tried to use this as a way to leverage alliances among those departments and the LEAs. So I'm just going to show you how I tried to do that, because I think that's been a problem.
So before we move on, please help me understand the waiver. So for the 95% testing, so the feds did not grant the waiver that we requested.
Well, first of all, there wasn't a waiver. Right. They just said the way it was written in the original plan was not approved. And so they said it's a non-negotiable because you haven't addressed the issue of 95%. And so then people went back and presented to the board this issue of the feds not accepting the 95%. Right? Okay. And so then it had to be represented to the board, and the board unanimously voted that they wanted to ask the feds for a waiver. Okay. Now, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding because some lawyers say that you can't actually ask for a waiver unless the plan is approved. But the plan isn't going to be approved because the argument we're making is that the state statute allows, for opt-out, which means that we don't hit the 95%.
Do other states allow opt-out?
Not that many. There's one, Colorado, but they actually solved the problem by running two systems. So federal accountability and state accountability. That's the way they did it. But our board didn't want to do that. In some ways for obvious reasons, but that goes back to this issue of who's opting out. And much to Kathy, and she's a teacher in Jordan, so much to board member Reeby's comments, she actually brought this issue up. And she said, we need to look at the data of who's opting out and then how that is having an impact on the poorest children.
If you look in our district, it's mostly the affluent schools that are opting out.
Well, I know. That's the point she's making. That's the point she's making. And as a consequence, then you're going to say you're not going to be compliant, and so then $150 million for poor children is not accessible. You see, so this is the issue. Okay. So on that happy note, I just handed out the Title III peer review. Now remember, this is just Title III. And we don't have to go through the whole thing, but if you look at the title, if you look at it, let me just make it bigger for people who are... We're just going to go to the last one. So in the peer analysis, so the way I did it is you can actually see, this is what the question is asking. Entrance and exit procedures, does it describe how it will establish and implement with meaningful consultation, represent? So this is what we had to address. So I bolded what the plan says we have to address. And because of all the work that people on that committee did and the almost 1,000 people who submitted their work, we got glowing reviews. So they said, yes, we meet all the requirements. Okay, then in the second one, it's about monitoring and technical assistance. How does the SEA describe how it will monitor progress? Now, the reason this is really important is when I was at the Title I conference in Philadelphia, the lawyers from the Department of Education said, quote unquote, it is really important for the state education agency to provide a way that every LEA monitors their own work. They do their own auditing, and you support them with that. So that's the whole point of the self-monitoring tool that helps you understand so that you're not in the dark about what the statute says and what civil rights obligations you have. So that's the whole point of having a self-monitoring tool, so that you all, right, can take care of yourselves, and then you hold us accountable for supporting you. That's the point. And it's an electronic portfolio, and if I die tomorrow and whatever, we actually have it, and whoever replaces me can say, oh, look at all the LEAs are doing these programmatic issues. They know how to evaluate their programs. They know how to assess using data. And eventually we'll have the EL data dashboard. And I'm going to talk to you about some other research if you're interested, because now I actually have a person in data and statistics designated to me so we can do research. So when we get to that point, I'll talk to you about some of the research we're doing about early college access for low income and EL kids, which is pretty interesting. But if we don't have the data and we're not using it and we don't change the way we're allocating resources, I'm just going to say that the state legislature is pretty clear they're going to take that money away. That's the new financial system that we're going to have. They're going to see who's asking for reimbursements. They're going to see how things are being processed. And if there's a lot of carryover, what is the logical conclusion? The logical conclusion, and if they don't see it actually connected to increased scores for third graders in reading, they're just going to say, okay, this money that we gave you for, reading intervention obviously isn't working, so we're just going to take it back. You see, so the last 2 years I've been trying to prepare you for this so that you're not at a disadvantage. So the fact that the lawyers said the best thing to do is to create structures and systems and processes where LEAs can really, monitor their own work and make good decisions. That's really the point. Okay, and so they are positive about that. So yes, we met all the statutory requirements. The next one is support English learners. Does it describe and assist eligible entities in meeting state-designated long-term goals for English language proficiency, including interim progress? Now, you should be thinking AMAOs. I mean, right? That's what you should be thinking. And because... Progress monitoring tool. Yeah, and the progress monitoring tool, right? That's what you should be thinking. And so the obligation then, and of course because WIDA was recalibrated, we're using, last year as the, the actual baseline, right? So in some ways, it's kind of weird, in some ways we're kind of in an advantage, right? And what we presented as the accountability system that's now in Title I, which I want you to know I didn't give you, because in the revisions, we just cut and pasted, because what ended up happening was whoever did the Title I thing actually didn't use the Title III stuff to just put it in there. And so then they kept on asking, well, you didn't put this in, because Title III is in now Title I. So, but that's solved, so you don't have to worry about that. So what I'm going to give you next, you can actually see that it was approved for accountability. And so it would be annual progress, right, for ELs toward English proficiency. So that's, what was that before? AMAO 1. The other one in the reporting is you want to see how many students, right, actually reach proficiency, because the way in which the test is recalibrated is really much more challenging. And the reason it is more challenging is that if kids don't reach English proficiency, then how do you expect them to do well on content assessments, right? And that would be like the third AMO. So one is, progress, annual progress, AMO 1. The second one is kids who are reclassified as English proficient based on a more challenging criteria, and working with the schools to build their capacity. You just can't say, oh, so, that kid reached a 5, so now, merrily go on your way. You can't say that. You have to actually really look at the kid's work and spend time with the student and see what kind of extra support they would need, because they're going to be monitored for 4 years. And the goal of monitoring is to make sure that students don't fall behind in their academic, right? Their academic success. That's really the point. They're not going to have a future if, all of a sudden they're 5 on the WIDA and then, they're getting straight Fs in like math and English and science. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, because the content vocabulary is really challenging. Okay, so this is where talks about the strengths, and then it talks about the weaknesses. Now remember, we didn't have to really do this, but I thought it was really insightful. It says, other than assessing students on state assessments and disaggregating the data, so this is the last page, by EL subgroup, there is minimal description of how the state will assist LEAs in helping to ensure that ELs meet challenging state academic standards. No date is provided for the long-term goal. Well, actually it was, but in Title I it wasn't. So the long-term goals is 2022. And then we have annual benchmarks. So we had to actually put, a goal. And an ambitious goal for a student based on the trajectory to become proficient is based on if they're students with interrupted formal education, if they're refugee students, all these variables that we see. You can't just say, oh, everybody's going to be English proficient in 3 years. But you can't have kids coming into our system. So I'm getting a little exorcised here. You can't have kids coming in as English learners when they're kindergarten kids and and then in high school they've never been exited and they're still at a level 3 or level 4. Okay, so that's unconscionable. Long term, that we cannot have that. There's something not right. So this is what they said. They said there's no date provided. This SEA did not describe how it will assist and support LEAs in meeting the state designed long-term goals for English language proficiency. And so then it says, if no, the specific information or clarification that an SEA must provide to fulfill and meet this requirement. Provide a description that supports available for LEAs in schools academic content instruction in English language arts, mathematics, and science to ensure that English language learners meet challenging state academic standards. The state must provide a date for long-term goals, so that's 2022. Describe how it will assist LEAs in meeting the state-designed long-term goals for English language proficiency. Okay, so I'm going to show you how now remember, I didn't have to respond to that, because peer reviews you don't have to. But I think it's bringing up a really important issue. The issue is, if English learners don't have access to academic language in the content area, how are they going to have a future? Ultimately that's the question. It's not just about English language proficiency. It's access to academic content and, based on OCR, increased preparation for early college coursework. What does your early college coursework classes look like? I'm sure you don't want to say it out loud, but you can talk about it. So I'm going to hand this out to you, but why don't you turn around and talk about how responding to this can really transform the way you work in your own agency with curriculum and assessment. A lot of the decisions that are being made in curriculum, from what I have observed, is really disconnected from what happens with ALS. Most content people have no idea how to work with English learners at all. Regular education teachers, they're still lecturing. Okay, this is not helping. So why don't you talk among yourselves and say, how could addressing this issue really transform what happens in your district in relationship to the curriculum department, the assessment department, the content teachers, right, in middle school and high school? So why don't you talk about that together? Okay, so we'll take another minute to finish up and then come back to the group. I don't really get it. Your microphone's are. I didn't say it loud. I can say it now. Okay, so let's come back together. Do you want to hand that out? Yeah. So what I'm now handing out is the ultimate final last edition for the Title III. So one is the peer analysis, but the other one is the actual. It's the actual Title III plan that's going to take the place of the master plan because it's based on ESSA.
Christelle.
So what questions do you have and what do you want to, I mean, do you see why the peer review gave me an opportunity to talk about the way in which curriculum and assessment and ALS work together? I mean, that's kind of the way I was trying to leverage it. Yeah.
I think that the discussion that we can have and looking at pulling assessment and curriculum together for the best needs of our kids is awesome. So addressing this component really helps me a lot. Based upon this other here, though, if we look at doing our own district plans, like that's out there on the webpage, if we model it after this, we're going to be just fine.
Yep.
Correct? Perfect.
Yeah, and that's why I try to integrate it into once you integrate it into ESSA, and because Title III is already approved, of course the issue is the whole plan has to be approved, right? So it's Title I that has to be approved, right? But once that happens, then we have the leverage to create different kinds of working relationships in our own agency, and it's not like you have an option. The curriculum department doesn't have an option not to work with people who have the expertise in working with English learners. That's not an option. You can't just say it doesn't, it doesn't fit your curriculum mapping or I don't know, whatever. The people who are doing the mapping, it's wonderful that they do good work, but the question is, so it's not sheltered, it's not scaffolded, it doesn't make content comprehensible. It doesn't make sense if people's abilities and the work that we do doesn't really help what happens in the classroom. If it's not helping the principal to understand what good classroom instruction looks like for a range of learners and who the learners are, then I don't really see us increasing the outcomes for English learners. So other comments or questions that you had based on what their comments were, and then I'm going to show you how I tried to address it. Yeah.
Steph, do you have any more of these?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Did you not get them?
We didn't get them all the way around.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I don't need one. I have one. No, I have one.
So this is...
Okay, so the only thing...
State Title III.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another comment. Okay. Now remember, this is actually the Title III plan. The other one was the peer review analysis. Those are two different things. The peer review analysis was what the feds gave us as a peer review. Even though we didn't have to respond to it, I saw this as a great opportunity to respond to something that I know we all kind of suffer from, which is silos. Silos don't work, So I just use it as an opportunity to try to figure out how we as an agency could better connect federal programs, English learners, with special ed, with mathematics, with the literacy initiative, with the people in teaching and learning. Right? Because it doesn't make sense if you have content specialists who are trying to support teachers and they really have no idea about how sheltered instruction looks in a classroom with regular ed teachers. Right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so other questions? Yes.
Just a comment. I would like to ask if anybody here is doing anything with proficiency-based grading, how they're doing that in integrating. We're working really closely with the language arts, the science folks, and everything else. But with the proficiency-based grading and looking at standards, and we're introducing the WIDA and things like that. But if any of Canyons, I think you're doing proficiency-based grading. Yes? No?
Not at the high school.
Oh, not at only elementary? All right.
Oh, use your.
So right now, elementary and middle school, high school is emerging, but we're not there yet with high school.
Well, I'd like to see how you're doing that from the lens of the L's, and how you're integrating into that, or if any other districts are doing that as well. So that's just my comment and my ask.
So I don't think the flyer's gone out, but I'll just say this. The University of Utah, so sorry for other universities who are online, asked me to design a micro-credential for advanced teaching in ESL to be provided next year in cohort. So I would be working with people who already have their ESL endorsements, but maybe it wasn't as effective as it could have been, or who are ELD coaches. And I would work with them for a year in relationship to using the actual student data on the annual progress report, the cognitive rigor matrix, the WIDA key uses standard, and designing instruction based on differentiated experiences for English learners at different levels. So once that flyer comes out, I'll send it to you. Don't ask me why I'm doing that. I think I'm insane, but, I think it'll be interesting. So why don't you look, any other comments about, this silos in relationship to content instruction? Yeah.
So I'm wondering how this information is being shared with superintendents, mostly because we all have various levels of authority and access, and I'm not always sure that we have the leverage to be able to create change.
So the question is really interesting because I actually I have a monitoring letter for the superintendents. Mm-hmm. So I'll show you how I integrated this into the monitoring system, because then there's no option. They just don't have an option. The superintendent doesn't have an option, the curriculum people don't have an option, the assessment people don't have an option, and the ALS people don't have an option. So, and that was intentional to make it collaborative. So in the actual official letter, it explains clearly that it's a program monitoring. It's not compliance in the typical way that people think about it, because it's all related to the way in which resources are allocated to improve instructional practices that have an impact on student outcomes. That's it. That's like the point. And if your resources aren't aligned in that way, then probably you should, think of it differently. I bumped into somebody and they said, oh, I used your Title III SS spending handbook with a principal who said they wanted to use Title III funds for a marquee. Okay, a marquee doesn't fit the purposes of the Title III grant, which is about outcomes for English learners to become proficient and show growth in academic achievement and support families. So no, you can't use Title III money for a marquee.
One more request.
Yes.
What is the possibility of maybe 3 times a year next year as we develop, and if the plan gets approved and we implement the requirements under ESSA. Can we have cross-department trainings at the state level that includes content teachers, both elementary and secondary, that will have assessment specialists and our own either teacher specialists or teams that we want to bring, and all of us in a room learning together and learning from one another and seeing each other's perspectives and how we could better support our students.
Yeah, I think part of that, there's a combination of things since there is a new finance department law about us not giving stipends to teachers at all, working on curriculum and things like that to develop. So we would have to work it out in a way, in a very strategic way in relationship to the specific outcomes. I did something like that with Jordan when we had it was like how many content instructional coaches? I think it was 2 years ago. And so I met with all the content. It was about 90. Yeah, 90 content instructional coaches. And then it was very interactive with people, and we really focused on using that data effectively, and they worked as teams together, and they were like, you had the CTE team and you had the special ed team and the PE department, so you had all these people together, and I think it was an advantage. And I think then when you do the follow-up with Karen afterward in that group, I think that also was really beneficial. So all we have to do is think about a proposal and think about financially how to actually organize that. I don't think it would be a problem. And I think it would be a good model for, helping people to work together collaboratively would be nice. So on page 86 of now this is the latest revision that was sent yesterday for Title III. And I want you to look at page 86. Thank you for coming. Yeah, it's okay. We're sorry you're not going to be with us, but thank you for coming. If you look at page 86, so this is what I put in there to address the peer review's comments. So I added the number 5, and it says, revision of annual improvement plan electronically monitored in the SEA grants management system. So we'll talk about that. Supports the use of student data for program evaluation and the effective allocation of resources for increased student growth in meeting annual targets for English language proficiency and Utah's challenging academic standards in mathematics, English language arts, and science. So do you see how that actually responds to what the peer reviewers said? So it would be like our responsibility. Now let's go down to the next part. So that was 86. So technical assistance through monitoring visits that include content specialists from the SEA in mathematics, English language arts, and science to provide supports for quality instruction in meeting the state's grade level academic content standards. So the monitoring is not, now I'm going to look at how you spend your money. Okay, so that I'm not really interested in that. What I'm interested in is building your capacity to evaluate how it is you effectively manage resources and braid funds in relationship to clear outcomes for students. That's the only thing that matters, right? And when you get the report and you haven't met your annual growth targets, then you have to get the whole group together, including curriculum, and you have to sit down and you have to decide how you're going to allocate resources. It's just this simple, logical way that you would continue to use data to evaluate effectiveness of a program. You can't just keep doing the same thing and then there are no results for English learners. Why would we do that? I mean, I'm not sure why we would do it. And I know there are issues, I know I've been in a district office. I know that there are political issues. I know that. But this is not politics. This is like kids' lives and their future. So we need to figure out how we're going to collaborate and get over this kind of, I don't know, whatever it is. I have no idea. So then it says, monitoring visits priority scheduling based on LEAs not meeting annual growth targets. Previously there was this cycle, here's year 3 and then you're up for it. And okay, so that, to me, that just never made much sense. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to really help the LEAs build their capacity to make solid decisions when, in fact, they're not meeting their annual, goals. You don't want people to get so far behind that then they're in a mess, like 3 years down the road, and then you're all in school improvement, which you will be anyway because it's based on, now the accountability system is based on English learners. Progress. So, I don't know, you might all end up having schools in the bottom 5% because of ELs.
I have just a question I'd like to throw out to all of you, though. We've done a little bit of research polling our third graders and looking at, say, DIBELS, for example, SAGE scores, for example, WIDA scores, for example, and cannot pull enough of a correlation. So, for example, a child who's scored a 4.0 on a WIDA and, done fairly well in DIBELS may not do more than a 1 on SAGE. I'm not looking at growth, but I'm just looking for a correlation. So can I look at a 4 student and are they capable of getting like the 2 to a 3 or whatever? But anyway, have you guys been able to look at that and also pull data to kind of say, is there a correlation? Am I looking at some things incorrectly to that? Because I'd like to find, as we analyze this and wanting our students to grow in not only language acquisition, which in our district we've always done very, very well in terms of the programs we use, increase language development.
Yep. Davis has too.
Sometimes we've done well in content and academic, and sometimes not so well, and so we've addressed those things. But does anybody see any kind of correlation where kids' scores are that?
Well, there's actually not going to be, right? And the reason there's not going to be is that the way in which the SAGE is used to determine proficiency, especially in English language arts, really has no correlation to their abilities in relationship to language proficiency. So one thing, and I'll give you some examples of a kind of a research study that we could do. I'm on the early college committee, and we're looking at course-taking patterns. And you'd be surprised how access and preparation really determines what happens as far as academic skills in the academic areas, right? So I'll just tell you generally what we found. And I can send you the course-taking patterns. We now have the business rules to actually do that for every single high school student in the entire state, every single high school. So if you wanted us to do an analysis of course-taking patterns and see the impact on access to early college courses, we could actually do that for you. So this is what we found when we looked at it. And I'll tell you what the sample is. So the sample we used for one group, well, we actually used the dual immersion kids. So we used dual immersion kids, which is really interesting, how well they do. And then we also used a cohort of kids in the AVID program who actually received a 4-year scholarship at the Eccles Business School and are all ready to graduate. Now think about this. So they're first ascent scholars. 4-year, full ride scholarships, including, not with the DACA kids, they went to London before this mess, but then now they can't go. But 4 years at the Eccles Business School, and all of them are going to graduate, and it's a group of, it's 10 in every cohort, and so it's a group of 30. So what we did is we took those individuals and we did a back mapping for when they were in kindergarten. So you want me to tell you what we found? So this is what we found. We found out that low-income EL kids, when they're reclassified as English proficient in grades 3, 4, 5, and then at the middle school have honors English and challenging courses, they end up when they get to high school, and if they have access to biology, we found a common science pattern in biology. If all the kids took biology, well scaffolded and challenging, that prepared them for concurrent classes, advanced physics, advanced mathematics, and most of those kids continued taking languages. And Spanish-speaking kids took other languages. We found that with the dual immersion kids as well, even kids who were resource kids. Now, the question ends up being, what in the system allowed those kids to be better prepared for early college challenging courses? What happened in those classrooms? So that means that the emphasis in what happens in elementary school is really critical. You cannot have English learners move from elementary school and not be reclassified. You cannot. They will not have a chance. You have to work on that. That means you're going to have to be in those classrooms with those teachers, seeing what they're actually doing that's rigorous enough for kids who are English learners, and they're actually tracking the kids. Yeah.
Just to add back to your question, when you look at DIBELS, it only the correlation with DIBELS is to reading comprehension, which is only one part of language development. So when you look at the domains, I believe, and the literature will support these, that we are teaching just the word recognition and fluency in the contextualized ways. So not with the text, completely isolated from the other domain, which is vocabulary and comprehension. Teachers need to be able to understand how to teach that simultaneously so then they could apply it on stage, right? When we teach that in decontextualized ways, they're not going to be able to apply that. Another piece is that we continue to teach at the word level, vocabulary, thinking that will amount to a discourse level, and that's not the case. Actually, it needs to be backwards, where we expose them to big ideas, develop conceptual knowledge, background knowledge, and then break it into the smaller pieces of the phonemic awareness. And all that has to be integrated. Otherwise, we are producing, and I believe this and the literature supports these, we continue to produce the results that we get.
Yeah, and I think that's the other issue. I'm going to send out this really excellent at Stanford, they have the website around language, and I know Jerry's taken like a MOOC or some courses from them, which is quite good, and it's on mathematics. Some of the best stuff that I've actually seen and how to work with English learners in mathematics that generally we don't know how to do very well. So I'm going to send you that because I think that's another way to think about what you would look for when you go into a class in elementary, middle, and high school in mathematics for ELs. So I'll send you that. So if you look at the way this is written, it's monitoring visits, priority scheduling based on not meeting annual growth in English language proficiency and end-of-level academic assessments for challenging state standards. Include the following timelines. Commendations and findings and recommendations submitted to the LEA within a week of the visit. Response to findings, recommendations, the LEA will have 30 days to respond to each specific finding with concrete actions integrated into their annual improvement plan and submitted to the Title III specialist at USBE. So this is a systematic way to look at programmatic issues and support you in having leverage to make changes. Otherwise, I think it's kind of hard to make changes at the district level. It just ends up being challenging. And this has nothing to do with compliance. This has to do with programmatic issues in relationship to how resources, which means human capital, not just funding, and the ways in which those resources are aligned that really supports what happens in the classroom. Right? So that's how I integrated that. So an example would be, in your science classes, the science specialist here, and I'll send you out what we're thinking of doing when we would go in for the observation. And there's all kinds of other stuff that's going to happen with focus schools that I can't really talk about because I'm not that involved in it right now, but I'll show you kind of the framework. It'll be the same framework that we're looking at. They'll be observing teachers, but from my viewpoint, the focus really is, so just what's the teacher doing? and that would be using Hess's descriptions in relationship to cognitive rigor. So what's the teacher doing, and what are the students doing? That's all. No judgments. You're just saying, and then we're going to give it all to you so you can see. And then you're going to have to make decisions about, oh, well, wow, I went to this classroom and, the kids were doing worksheets and the teacher was, at her desk or his desk or whatever. I'm sure that wouldn't happen, but it would just be impartial eyes in the subject areas. Okay, not this like general, do you know what I mean? It would really be focused on, so we'll have the science specialist go, we'll have the math specialist go, we'll have me as the ELD person actually visiting. If you have ELD coaches, my expectation is that I'm walking around with ELD coaches to see if the kinds of observations that they're making are related to what's actually making a difference for instruction. We can't have ELD coaches that are not, just like we can't have principals who can't give the kind of feedback that a teacher needs to be an effective teacher with a range of students, right? And so we're just trying to provide the support to help you do the work you need to do. To me, it just is common sense. It's not punitive. It's not any of that. It's like our obligation as a state agency to provide the kind of technical assistance that can help you. That's really the point. And we can't have teachers continually say things like, well, I know how to scaffold instruction, and then you go into their classroom, and we're not really sure if they actually know what that means, right? Because it should be visible, right? Should be visible in their classroom. So there's another tool that's an observation tool and talks about sheltered instruction, which I have a little bit of a problem with because most people don't even know what that looks like. For me, it's just really concrete to say, what was the teacher doing? What were the students doing? That's just data for you. And then you guys figure it out. And if you want our help, we'd be happy to help you. It's not about evaluation. It's just gathering data. What the teachers are doing, what the students are doing. Any questions related to the final submitted plan? I hope this is helpful. I'm trying to think about ways that we can really create a collaborative environment instead of, these kind of strange political things that go on. Rhonda?
I wondered when the letter was going to come out. That's going to be a statewide letter.
I don't know.
Don't know. And then also you said there was going to be a matrix about, you're kind of going to classify English language learners. If you're a refugee, we expect you to be proficient in this many years. That matrix not?
It won't be, because the way that we actually wrote it was we actually talked about all the variables in relationship to the trajectory. And we modeled it, but part of the problem, as you know, the way in which students are coded in the data warehouse, it's like a district that has all these refugees, and all of a sudden in the data warehouse, it's like there are 10. Okay, so there's an issue in relationship to how the people who input the data at the, are classifying the way this, the categories for students. So we tried to make it general enough where we said that based on all these different variables, we took kind of a general stance and said based on the research it would be 5 to 7 years, but based on when they come in, if they have interrupted education, that kind of stuff, it would depend. But that being said, it's very clear that there are still annual benchmarks and growth related to growth toward English proficiency that everyone will be held accountable for.
Is that articulated anywhere?
It's in the plan.
It's in the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, that says those things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And the fact that it's approved is a good thing. We don't have to worry. I mean, at some level. Okay, do you want to take a stand-up break, and then we'll come back? And what we're going to do is, well, before you take the break, I'm just going to tell you that, see where it says the status of the fee waiver audit and the related legislation? Okay, the bill that I wasn't involved in it, but I read it. The legislator who proposed it has pulled it. And one of the key indicators in there was a clear statement about students being disenfranchised and districts using excuses in relationship to not providing waivers, fee waivers. So that was pulled for whatever reason. The actual statewide audit will come out in the spring. And just to be clear, the injunction is still open for every school. So, and the injunction is a heavy thing to read. We're going to redesign our new webpage, and we're going to do that today before we leave. And I'm going to actually put the injunction on there. And I might do a summary or something, because we can't keep saying, well, it's the state legislator's fault for not funding appropriately, and we won't have programs. So we're going to invoice refugee children and, poor children for money. Okay, no. Okay, we're not going to do that. Okay. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of other things. So why don't we take a break and come back in about, we'll start again at 10:45. Okay, so take a break, get a drink. Okay, so could we come back together? So what I handed out was so because in the new plan it talks about the monitoring based on need, I sent out the so everybody should have this copy. So it's going around, so the people who are talking could. I'm glad you're talking because that's the point, right? That's the point of the meetings, is to connect. So the Title III LEA monitoring based on the S estate plan. And I want you to know if there's if you're being, if your LEA is being monitored for different things like special ed or whatever. So I'm trying to organize everything so that monitoring will not be overlapping, so that LEAs won't be like totally exhausted because, the special ed department is coming and then the ears people are coming and, all of that. So I'm trying to coordinate it so that wouldn't be an undue burden, right? So that you wouldn't be monitored to death. So I'm trying to organize things in that way. The best thing I suggest is what Park City did, which is they asked me to come and monitor them, which I think was very beneficial because they made lots of changes based on the feedback when we had conversations with the teachers and the administrators. So it does give you, so just think about it this way, it gives you actually some leverage to make changes at the district level where you might not have that opportunity. So the way I've organized this, if you look at it, it goes back to it's based on S, and it just simply says providing feedback, technical assistance. It's to learn about your successes. One of the issues, it didn't work out this year. And maybe if the state plan isn't approved, it won't ever work out. But part of the issue around allocations and it being uploaded to the UCA is we wait for charters, because when charters are expanded, it has to be reallocated. So the initial allocation is done based on the previous year's enrollment for Title III, right? Then you're supposed to be making plans based on that and based on typically what happens when we get the actual grant from the federal government. Last year it was a little bit more than it was before. Okay, then what happens is, we have no control over that because it comes all the way through the finance department, so I like nothing to do with that. It's uploaded into the UCA as a preliminary allocation. Then, based on charter schools and the expanding charter schools and the way in which they have to put in regional consortium with the fiscal agent, it determines how the final allocations are done. So I'm just trying to explain to you how complicated this is. So we finally, because it's federal law in relationship to the threshold, if an LEA does not have $10,000, then you're not eligible. And if you're not eligible, even though you have ELs, I've organized charter schools. Districts are different because the districts are, it's regional, and they have a fiscal compliance person who takes that responsibility on. And so before, when I first came, it was very confusing because there were charters, like in southern Utah connected to a district in, I don't know, somewhere else in the state. That's actually against federal law. It has to be regional. So we developed the regions, and because there was a challenge in relationship to someone being a fiscal analyst and taking the role of that, because that's what the consortium says. If you don't make the threshold of $10,000, you have to be in a regional consortium, you have to develop a plan together, and all the finances and reimbursements are done through the fiscal agent in the consortium. Now, when you have increased charters, you have to reallocate that money. Okay, so you see how confusing this is? When you have charter consortiums who, by right, have the opportunity to get a fiscal agent and have access to the funds, and you're waiting for them to do that and then do the memorandum of understanding so they can be allocated in the UCA. But if no one wants to be a fiscal agent in the consortium, then you end up withholding that money. That has to be all reallocated. It's about, between $100,000 and $200,000. It's a lot of money. So what ended up happening is, I think it was last week, the final allocations were uploaded. So in the UCA, which will no longer exist this next year, you should have your Title III allocations. Okay, now it's really important for people who actually know what English learners need. You should actually be in charge of the Title III budget. It shouldn't be somebody else. You should actually know what's going on with the Title III budget. Okay, and if you need me to help you to make that clear to your district, then, you can let me know. It shouldn't be somebody else. It should, if you're the one who has the programmatic knowledge and understands what English learners needs, then it seems logical that you should have some control over the budget, right? Because ultimately you would be held accountable. So one of the provisions in Title III is to withhold some money, which I never like to do, but it's about recognition. And because of the big gaps in relationship to the recalibration of WIDA, we sent out preliminary information, right? Because it's going to be disaggregated by English learners, the accountability system, English learners as well as English learners with disabilities. I cannot tell you how troubling it is to hear people come and tell me, because there are no secrets. I know this is a big state, but don't think you can keep anything from me, because people come and tell me all the time. You cannot deny a child who is an English learner dual rights in relationship to disabilities. And you cannot say things like, well, we're going to actually wait until the student is English proficient before we assess them for special needs. Okay, that's against the law. You can't do that. Okay, so, and this just came up. I mean, it's, and it's not just with one LEA. It came up with like 2 other LEAs. So this is not good. So the point is that if we're going to learn how to help each other and be collaborative, that we shouldn't be afraid of feedback, right? Because the point of feedback is to correct. It's not about punishing or blaming. So I had thought about creating a recognition, since, we're not very good at recognizing people and developing talent, and I thought this would be really great. But then because of this issue around the consortium, I couldn't. I'm hoping next year we might be able to, and designate it in relationship to LEAs and schools specifically who have made progress, because that would be like so cool that one of your schools made like amazing gains with like level 1 ELs, or, you ended up reclassifying lots of, kids, and it was the work of a school. So I'm hoping that we can actually do a monetary allocation for recognition for schools in your LEAs that are making progress. Because you all should be learning from those schools. Other schools should be learning from those schools. It shouldn't be, an example is the Title I school in Ogden, Lincoln, that was recognized as a distinguished school, and the one in Provo, which is Spring Creek. And in the Title I conference, I saw all of them there and it was really inspiring, to see all these, this auditorium of like almost 3,000 people recognizing, these 2 schools from Utah. It was like really moving. And I think we need to do more of that. So I'm hoping that we would be able to do that. It wouldn't take away from it wouldn't be taking away from the amount that you're allocated at all. It wouldn't be done at all. But when you put aside money for charter consortiums and then they don't apply, then that's the money that we would be using, because we can't actually use it for an award because it's supposed to be designated for them. Right, you see? So I just wanted to say that so you understand. Okay, and so again, the process is in the pre-visit, and I actually had a really good pre-visit with Sandra Buendia, but then I found out that they were being monitored again from another group, and I thought, well, this is kind of ridiculous. And so we're waiting. The other thing is, if there are schools in improvement and charter schools in improvement and all of that, that's really for the people who are here working right with school improvement and focus groups and focus schools and schools in comprehensive support and all that. So, the goal is not to overburden people so they're totally exhausted. So I'm aligning that so we're not duplicating visits, right? Because it just seems unfair, really. And so meeting ahead of time is really important so we can decide. And the goal is that doesn't put an undue burden. It's not like all the schools, but it's a feeder pattern in your district where the most ELs are. Because really that's the point in relationship to effective transitions and support for students from elementary all the way up to high school. So this is just an overview of how we're trying to create additional supports as well as a timeline and classroom visits, and how we would actually work with the person at the district who's the ALS director about the classroom visits. And if you want us to, have classroom visits, if you have instructional coaches who are supposed to be providing that support, then I actually want them to come with me when I do visits. So especially since it's really clear that the peer reviewers said, well, how are you actually supporting content instruction? You can't just, let people go on their merry way. So do you have any questions? This is something that I sent out to you a long time ago. I went over it in webinars, but I'm trying to really change the way in which we think about technical assistance. It's not about audits. It's not about gotcha. It's not about compliance. It's about the state agency's responsibility to provide technical assistance. We're accountable for that. And we're not doing a good job. It's, it's not your problem. It's our problem.
Christelle, I should know this, but could you clarify for me what the growth targets are, the annual growth targets, and where do I find those?
They're actually in the plan that I just gave you. So in this plan where it says Title III, the annual growth targets are actually there. So when it says long-term goals, it's on page 80. So you did get this, right? Yeah. What is Title III plan? So we have the language assistance programs.
So is it the 6 that are listed on page 84?
No, page 80.
No, it's measurements of interim progress.
Are there just 2 of them? Growth
No.
targets?
No, it's annual. It's based on the annual, and then the long-term goal is 2022.
So, in this latest paper you just gave us, sorry. In the paper you just gave us, it refers to, under purposes, number 3. It says supplement, not supplement, related to the 3 outcomes. Those aren't talking about growth targets. What are the 3 outcomes and how are they different than the growth targets?
Well, the growth, they are. I mean, the first one is AMA01, which is increased language proficiency every year. Right? That's 1.
Right.
Number 2 is reclassification.
Right.
Right. And the third one is academic progress, student growth related to mathematics, English language arts, and science.
So there are 3. Those are the 3 growth. Those are the 3 AMAOs, but we don't call them AMAOs anymore.
No, we don't call them that. Because they call them interim. They call them interim benchmarks, interim targets as well, which is annual. So annual targets, and then long-term goal, which is 2022.
Okay. And they appear to me like they're kind of listed on page 84.
Well, on page 80, it says measurements of interim progress. On page 80, it says measurements of interim progress. And it describes the data and statistics. It says overall composite scale core for expected growth at each proficiency level, WIDA performance definitions. So it gives you, and it gives you how we're going to use that. See, the issue ends up being that Title III accountability is now in Title I. I didn't give you anything in Title I because Title I isn't approved. And that's where the accountability for Title III is. It's in Title I. It's in Title I. That's why I didn't give that to you. But the point is, there's annual growth targets for both elementary and secondary for English learners, right? And that'll be determined by the data and statistics people. And then when I send you a letter, I'll say, well, you didn't, this was the target, the annual target, and you didn't meet it. Or you did meet it. The annual target for growth toward English language proficiency, and the annual targets for academic content. Now remember, all that accountability data is in Title I. Title III accountability is in Title I. And it's also aligned to state accountability.
Okay.
Now the reason that's important is that every school, whether you're a Title I school or not, and you have 10 ELs, you're accountable. Whether you take Title III money or not, has nothing to do with that. It's a part of state accountability. The N size is 10.
When we look at what was AMAO 3, which is challenging
Well, it's academic standards.
academic standards, right?
Yeah.
Are all English language learners included in that, or only those who are fluent, who are in the monitoring?
No, all of them are included.
Okay.
So if the academic growth in the academic content for all your English learners, right, is below the target, then you're going to be an improvement.
I guess I'm still just confused with what are the 6 things listed on 84, because on page 84, number 5 says the number and percentage of ELLs meeting challenging state academic standards each of the 4 years after such students no longer receive.
Yeah, but this is just reporting. Right, this is just this is an accountability. Okay. This is just describing reporting. This is what you have to report, that it's our responsibility to provide. See, this is, with the data and accountability people, we met and we identified all the reporting requirements. This is not accountability. These are reporting requirements. These are 2 different things. The reporting requirements so that you can better adjust your educational programs. You see, so this is reporting. This describes reporting in the statute. That's what it describes. The accountability is in Title I for Title III.
And the accountability is still pretty much those same 3 AMAOs that we've used before.
Yes, but remember, it has clear benchmarks because that's what ESSA, that's what they asked. Okay. If you're not making your annual target for English language proficiency growth, the 0.4, you're in trouble. Okay. It's not so much in trouble as much as what are we doing, what are we not doing, how are we going to fix it? So this is the way you can talk about it. I'm just a pragmatist. Instead of getting all hysterical, all you say is, okay, so we didn't meet the annual target. You can't not make that public and pretend that it's going to go away. The board, your board should know, your local board, everybody in the district should know, right? If you don't make your target for English language proficiency growth, if you don't meet your target in growth for English language learners in mathematics, English language arts, and science, okay, you say, what's happening? What's not working? How are we going to change this? How are we going to provide extra support? That's the LEA's responsibility in relationship to what happens in the schools. That's the point of the accountability. The reporting is a way to help you better understand what's happening with your ELs. This is just reporting. It's not the accountability.
Okay, that's where I was confused. I was looking at those reporting things and trying to mesh them with the accountability, and they weren't quite the same.
Because remember, the reporting is different than accountability, because see, this is what people still don't get. The accountability, and I know once once it happens, then people will get it. Right? Everyone is now, every single school that has at least 10 ELs is accountable in the state accountability system for the progress of 10 ELs. Whether you're Title I or not, whether you receive Title I or Title III funds or not, you're accountable. Your schools are accountable. And if the LEA is not figuring out how to work with those schools, then you're going to end up being in targeted assistance for if you're in Title III. But on the state, from the state accountability system, it's going to end up being on the public report card. So that's the question.
So one more thing I'm just a little confused about still. On the page you just barely passed out, the Title III LEA monitoring based on ESSA state plan.
Yeah.
Under C, under purposes, where it says related to the 3 outcomes.
And I only have 2. Sorry about that. The third one is really about engaging families. So I should have changed that. It's not 3 outcomes. It is 3 outcomes, but I should have included. See, here's the other issue. The other issue is how we engage. It's a civil rights issue. See, I'm trying to help you all be knowledgeable about civil rights. You can't wait for somebody to do a complaint and then be in trouble. So I'm trying to help you with that. So the fact that you have to really engage parents, like in the Title I Compact, you have to actually support English learners, families, in a language they understand.
Right.
Okay, and you can't use Title III money for that. You cannot use Title III money for your civil rights obligations. You have civil rights obligations, period. This is your obligation. If you're not, most people aren't worried because the way things are translated, and I've tried to mitigate that by translating all the forms for you. Right, so I've tried to do that because part of the issue is one of the reasons we haven't done any of that, obviously, because nothing's been approved. So now I'm willing for us to design the website to at least have these things available, right? Because before, none of the fact that that Title III is approved is a relief, because now we can start moving on, and then all the things that you need access to will be on, the website, which will be frequently asked questions. All these questions that you're asking, I'm going to ask you to put them down because they'll be on that page. Go ahead, Wade.
You said that you translated
everything.
So will that be on the webpage?
Yes, everything will be.
Like the exit letter?
Yes, everything.
Okay,
but the reason I didn't do that was because it wasn't approved. And the other thing is, in the new ESSA law, it says standard forms across the state. You can't have like all these options. That's like ridiculous. So now everybody knows, everybody has it, and if you have additions that you want to make, that's fine. But there are standard forms that I send out to everybody for feedback, and that's written in the plan that there'll be standard forms, because that's what the statute says. It doesn't say, that you can use any kind of process for entrance and exit, and you can use any form that you want, to tell parents their rights. It has to be accessible to them.
A question on that, based upon districts going to online registration, as long as in our online registration it's worded exactly how it is here with the information above about students who set this and they'll be tested. I mean, as long as that's all in that same process, we're fine.
That's right.
We don't need a separate form that just, because I just went through this with my registration people. I said, it has to say it just like it says it here. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Perfect. And Provo does a really good job where the way they organized the way in which refugee families and Spanish-speaking families are registered and the support that they provide, and it is all online. And you saw, and I apologize because there was some problem. We probably should have Michelle go through the webinar because I guess it was like a lag time and people couldn't hear her, and we were having trouble with UEN. But they have an actual electronic portfolio on PowerSchool. Where they keep everything as well as the monitoring tool and how the registration happens. Because this is what they and one of the reasons, and this is a good example, they were monitored and got in, in challenging circumstances, and Michelle came in and kind of cleaned things up. And part of the issue is, when families come to schools and secretaries make decisions about a child that should be tested because she thinks a Spanish-speaking parent is lying, or the way they look, or whatever. Okay, and we can't pretend this doesn't happen because it does. So we're trying to provide structures, processes, and support so these things don't happen. Right? That's all. It's not about punishing or blaming anybody. It's just trying to create a system where we have a free, appropriate public education for all children, no matter what their zip code, no matter what their language is. Right? That's, sorry, any other question? Yeah.
The disaggregated L data by disability, is that only under the reporting and the technical assistance from the state, or is that part of the accountability measure as well?
It's actually a part of the federal accountability system. So it's English learners and then English learners with disabilities. That's why when I sent you the preliminary, we disaggregated it by ELs with disabilities. And I know we have a lot of work to do in that area. Part of it is because people jump to assumptions about, kids. If they're not moving fast enough, then all of a sudden, they think they have a disability. And then if they don't speak English appropriately, then we don't want to, test them. I mean, it's challenging. And it's nobody's fault. So that's why we had to figure out how we're going to provide the assistance to help you do that. We don't want you to be caught in an OCR issue. How many of you in this room are in an OCR issue that has not been resolved? Okay, so this is not good. we're trying to help you be knowledgeable and to do things ahead of time, to be preventative instead of, getting in trouble because of an OCR complaint. It's hard to get out of an OCR complaint. It is. But it'd be better if you were 12 years? 5 years?
Oh, no, I'm not. I just have a comment.
So, and that's the other issue, right? We just want to be helpful. We just don't want you to be in that situation.
Well, I just want to say one thing before.
Yeah.
Oh. So ours is not with Title III, but I'm over other OCR complaints. But it's like what you're saying with the monitoring visit, though. OCR comes in and helps us improve. And so this may sound crazy or whatever, but sometimes that's what we need to have that outside look, just like you're saying.
That's right. I
Otherwise,
totally agree.
we don't have leverage to make the changes that we know need to be done.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's actually a good thing I'm here and not as a private citizen, because OCR would be really busy with my complaints, frankly. So, but I don't do that because I work here.
So my comment/question is for C. I know you've provided us a guidance for supplement versus supplant under Title III. But I'm really interested, and I know we don't have this yet because Title I has not been approved.
Yeah.
But eventually, I'd like to see a similar guidance for how the state sees that process for braiding funds. Specifically, I'm really interested if the state sees not just Title I funding, but funding under block grants that should be supporting our students, and are those funds going to be considered for this braiding process of leveraging and reallocating resources?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to give you a hard copy of the handbook because there is a section in here that talks about how you could use different title programs in connection. And there's some really, again, Provo has one of the best models in relationship to braiding. But remember, part of the issue ends up being kind of the framework in relationship to this basic principle that the state board wants to honor local control. And while I agree with that, you should actually provide some kind of support so that people actually know what they're doing, and then use really exemplary practices from like other LEAs and schools that are doing like amazing work.
In providing examples and non-examples, I think that should be part of this website construction as well. What are good examples versus stay
Don't do
away
this.
from these? Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll probably, when I send this to you, we can also we can beef it up with, there's an example and a non-examples in here of using funds. And of course, I give you examples. But we actually don't want to put that there. But they give you really concrete examples. And I think it ends up being, well, you'll see in the actual application. So any other questions about monitoring? And 100% with Charlene. This idea is to really, provide the outside view, give you feedback, and provide the support that you need to make the changes. And change is hard for anybody. No one is like being critical of people who don't want to change, even if what you're doing doesn't really work, because you might be invested in it or you've always done it that way or whatever. So it's not about blaming anybody. It's about trying to figure out how we're going to get beyond this. Okay, so do you want to see the new application for Title III funds? I know
Excuse
you're
me,
dying.
Christelle. I do have one question. Just wondering about if these forms will be on your website.
Yeah, they will. When we eventually, when we get to the outline for the website, I have a list of all the things that we're going to put up there, and then you're going to put stuff up there that you want, and then we'll do it that way based on our needs instead of, somebody else's idea about what we need. So all those forms will be there. So I'll show you because I have an outline of it. So here's the application. And the company, I saw them in the, they're here today.
Are they going to do trainings for this new grant management system? We keep hearing about it, but we don't know. We know UCA is going away, but we haven't heard other than.
The company that came in, they have done special ed, and they've done federal programs. But for all the other grants, it's not done yet.
So could feasibly we have to do federal programs and special ed under the new grant management system and still use UCA? They're not, okay.
Nope.
So UCA won't go away till they actually have this up and running.
No, UCA is going away, and they'll have it up and running by, well, they say by May. That's what they told us.
And we haven't heard anything about any training.
Okay, so I guess I should change this. So think about it this way. This is just, this is just a way to see how flexible we are. And what a good sense of humor we have. Just kind of, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of, that would be one way to think about it. Okay, so you ready? So here's I tried to make it pretty simple. So I took some of the questions from the UCA, because you had to do this anyway, right? And I quoted the law, just so everybody knows that that it is a statutory requirement. So a description of the programs and activities conducted by the LEA with the funds received and how such programs and activities supplemented programs primarily funded by state and local funds. So 1, explain how your LEA is using student data to evaluate the effectiveness of your language instruction program. Now the reason this is in here is pretty obvious, right? If you're not making your annual growth goals and you don't have students being reclassified and ELs are not making progress in academic content, then I don't know, there has to be something going on. So we're just trying to help you build your capacity to use data that we're going to provide you, right? So it shouldn't be like you're stressed out trying to figure out where you're going to find this data, right? It's our obligation to give that to you. And we have a new system called Tableau. And if anyone's interested, I'll bring a copy down of something that they did recently for co-teaching with students with disabilities in math and how they organize that. So, and it's visual. I mean, it's actually, you can make sense of it. It's not like these tables with all these numbers that you can't figure out. So, you know, it's our commitment to do the EL dashboard to provide those kinds of things for you so that you can make good decisions. And if you need help in using a protocol, we can also put those kinds of things on there too. Describe your evidence-based model for instruction and the curriculum materials, elementary and secondary, that are supplemental to those purchased with state and local funding. Okay, so this is just trying to help you be in compliance with supplement and not supplant. Explain how you allocate resources to individual schools to impact the school's increased success for English learners, specifically meeting the annual growth goals toward English language proficiency and supporting the increased academic achievement. This includes the use of instructional coaches or school-based ELD support or those who are qualified. Okay, you cannot leave this out because you realize because this is an application, that means you won't get the funds. You have to fill it out. You have to work with people in your district and figure out, you know, how these resources are being used in a way that's making a difference for kids. You can't be allocating funds for things that aren't making a difference for children. And we all know that. I keep on saying that over and over again. I know you know this. So the list of specific schools that did not meet the interim goals for ELs in the state and federal accountability. Remember, the federal accountability for Title I is now aligned to the state accountability. Please explain how you will support them with a strategic reallocation of resources. So you can't have your schools floundering around. I mean, you know, that's the obligation of the district to figure out, you know, why a school is struggling. You should be supporting them. And not just saying, well, we're going to use the same old allocation, and you all have to figure it out. Okay, then the assurances. So those are the 4 questions. So I tried to make it simple. I think there are other ones that are like, you know, 80 assurances or something. The assurances for Title III are based on the ESSA statute and the LEA monitoring tool. So if you're using the monitoring tool, then your assurances for Title III are just, you know, I mean, it's logical. I just tried to align everything. So the LEA provides effective language instruction that meet the needs of English learners, demonstrate success for each learner. So you're just going to say yes or no. So my assumption is you're going to say yes, right? But I just want you to know that it's aligned to the monitoring tool to support you in saying this is what you're going to do. The LEA's language instruction are staffed with appropriate licensed teachers, and this is the Utah rule. So I put the, you know, where it actually is. And then the LEA follows the entrance, exit, and 4-year monitoring procedures as outlined in the ESSA state plan. So all of these are just really logical. It's just aligned to what you're already doing. The LEA, this is a little bit of a challenge. The LEA ensures that internal controls, that means policies, processes, and procedures, are implemented to effectively use resources, supplement, not supplant, at the school level to support the purpose of the grant, which is increase outcomes for English learners. At the LEA, you cannot have people at the school site using funds inappropriately. And it's your responsibility as a district to ensure that that doesn't happen. You can't have principals going off, doing things, and then you don't have any internal control. And, a 1 hour professional development at administrators meeting is not enough. You have to have internal controls. You can't have someone just go to the business administrator and have them sign off, on something that they're going to buy that doesn't connect to the purposes of the grant. Okay, so we're clear about that, right? Okay. The LEA ensures that no student is denied the opportunity to participate in a class or school-sponsored activity because of the inability to pay a fee. I'm not going to say any more about that. It's the waiver fees, it's the injunction, it's the Utah Code. The LEA understands its legal obligation in Section 1703 of the Equal Education Opportunity Act of 1974 and the joint guidance of the civil rights of English learners to overcome language barriers that impede English learners from participating equally in state and LEA educational programs. So we're still under Lau versus Nichols. We're still under the civil rights. The more you know what that is, the better off you are. The LEA ensures that parents receive meaningful communication in a language they can understand. If I see another invoice to a family in English, to a Sudanese family, I'm going to run from the room screaming. Such as through translated materials or a language interpreter, and to adequate notice of information about any program, service, and activity that is called to the attention of English-speaking parents. You can't treat families that don't speak English differently from those that have access in English. Okay. The LEA offers equitable services to eligible private school students and eligible student parents, teachers, and other educational personnel by initiating the consultation process with officials of private schools before the start of each school year. That's just like a non-negotiable. I mean, we all know that, right? You don't want to get in trouble for that. That's not a good one. So the assurances are aligned with the monitoring tool that support the evaluation of your programs and allocating resources. Okay, so do you want to talk with each other for a few minutes, or should we go on, or do you want to make comments, or do you have questions? Believe it or not, I'm trying to make things simpler for you. I know that sounds kind of strange, but I'm just trying to make it clearer, more systematic, so that you can bring this back to people in your district and say, right, if you don't know this, yeah.
Okay, first of all, when will the application for funds be due? What data are we going to look at? Are we always going to be a year behind, or are they going to look at current? Where are we going to be on that?
Okay, so you realize I have no control over any of this.
I understand all that, so that's why I'm just kind of proposing.
Okay, so let me suggest. So this is what typically I've heard from like the finance department and the grants management people. Their deadline is to have the new system up for the end of this fiscal year. So it would be, so typically the G5 for the federal programs comes around May. And it takes kind of an act of Congress. I know that's ironic, but it takes an act of Congress to actually, I have access to the Title III budget. So when they let me know that it's uploaded, which is only because it's appropriated through Congress, which we're on a continuing resolution since we don't have a budget, right? I think the end again is in March sometime. It gets uploaded, and as soon as it gets uploaded, I send it to the finance department. They develop the award letters based on the enrollment, the end enrollment of Title III students, of English learners, from the previous year for the preliminary allocation, right? So the goal, even though that didn't happen this year, I don't know. So the goal is that you would have your allocate, because you know it didn't happen this year, right? You would actually have your allocation by July 1. That's the goal. then you can obviously make decisions in relationship to programmatic issues, hiring issues, allocations to schools, I mean, all that kind of stuff. Right? That's the goal. Now, because we have WIDA access data that, believe it or not, is, and this is an issue of DRC because they control the data. We don't control the data. They control the data. So WIDA, and then they contract out with DRC. Okay, so then you have the preliminary data, but then in May, but then it goes through this process. So because if we have an EL dashboard, which the data and statistics people promised me we would, because of reporting requirements, then the goal would be by the end of, the beginning of that year, so July 1, the finance year, we'd have that data if we have the EL dashboard, because then it would be on the gateway and all you'd have to do is go and get the report. So that's an advantage because before that we didn't have that assurance. Now we do have the assurance of an EL dashboard from data and statistics. But there's been a big turnover in IT, so we won't really go into that. But that's our goal.
No, just kind of wrapping my head around that. So.
See, aren't you happy? This is like such a happy experience. Actually, it's more organized than it has been for the last couple of years. So, I mean, I think in some ways, ironically, we're in a better situation. People are telling me they're... Okay, so I'm not going to worry about the screen. Let me see. Let me look at the agenda because we have time to look at a website. I want you to design the website, which is exciting, especially since the new website I can't really find anything on. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I'm also going to hand out the, and I gave this to you before, and it'll be on the website. It's the shortened version of the spending handbook that people are actually using, cutting and pasting and sending it to principals and saying, well, you really can't do this. And in here, it does talk about the general purposes, as well as definitions of English learners and children and youth and immigrants. So it gives you a clearer definition of it. We're not going to go over it, but it's my attempt. Oh, here, you might not have enough here. And when you go through it and you look through it, especially a relationship to, it gives examples and non-examples, Annalise. So that's one good thing. And then, immigrant fundings is very strict in relationship to the line items of how you can spend, right, immigrant funds. And it's actually based on a formula that was approved by the feds in relationship to increased, because it has to be a significant increase, and you have to define how you do that, and it's based on a formula from the previous 2 years. So the way this is organized, and for the people online, I sent all this information. It tells you the purposes, again, so this goes back to the purposes really clearly about why you have a Title III grant. It talks about supplement, not supplant requirement. It gives you an example. Issue 2, the LEA may not use Title III funds to meet its civil right obligations. So I kept hammering on that. But it's outlined more clearly, which is connected to, so this is a mirror of the monitoring tool, so it's not a big surprise. So it just tells you, no, you can't use funds for this. And then issue 3 on page 4, it says, in some circumstances, an LEA may use Title III funds to pay for EL-related activities under Title I. So this goes to your point. Because remember, this is the thing that's really interesting. We're actually in a better position. I know it sounds strange, but we're actually in a better position now because Title III accountability is in Title I, and Title I has more money. So if you're not working closely with Title I in your district, you need to figure out how you're doing that, because you can use this to your advantage and with EL kids. this is a really great example of braiding funds in relationship to needs. And then it just talks about, again, providing tutorials. You know, I'm doing focus groups with high school students and parents. And one of the things that the high school students said who are ELs, I've done, I think, about 100 in groups in classrooms, high school classrooms. I've heard from about 120 students, 6 or 7 classrooms in Salt Lake, Park City, meeting with some people in Cottonwood. And if you have parents who are interested in being in a subcommittee, I'll send out a request. I'm actually doing focus groups with parents and students for the early college committee. And then we're recording them, we're transcribing them, and then we're doing data analysis to show what the critical issues are for kids. One of the biggest things that I heard from kids in high school who are English learners was the need for tutoring, really relevant tutoring, and helping them. So tutoring in content areas. The other thing that they said is if teachers wouldn't say things to them like, oh, this is too hard for you, and you can do this other assignment. High school students are really clear who have a history of being English learners that this is kind of a humiliating experience for them when they hear this over and over and over and over again from teachers and counselors and everybody else. This is, you know, this doesn't help someone understand who they are as a learner. They also said that being in AP classes and IB classes where they're the only EL or the only minority person is incredibly distressing for them because they don't really get the support that they need, even though they want to be in those concurrent classes and AB, and they want to be there, right? But they just don't. They just don't get the kind of support that they need. It's not as scaffolded for them as it should be.
Excuse me, Christelle.
Yeah.
I have a question about the point that you just made about when the teachers say this is too hard for you, do a different assignment. The different assignment, that's not a getting scaffolding or differentiation from the main assignments. It's something completely different. I just wondered what the teachers were having them do.
Well, this is what the students said. So the students have said to me that when there's an assignment given, a teacher will come over to them because they know they're ELs. And they'll say to them, this probably will be too hard for you, and you can do something else. Okay, students actually don't appreciate that, right? They don't want to be told by anyone that they want to actually be challenged. I mean, this is what they love. This is what they've told me. They want to be challenged and they want to be treated in a way that doesn't shame them. You see what I'm saying?
Right, but I just wondered when they say do something else, if it was a scaffolded version of the assignment or just what the something else was.
Well, I don't know. I'm just telling you what students have said to me. But see, part of the issue is why? I mean, shouldn't the instruction be scaffolded anyway? I mean, that's the other question. And why would they be singled out publicly? I mean, that's what the kids are saying. They're saying that the environment that they're in fact, one girl who is, I think she's in calculus. This was a high school student. She said, the teacher assumes because I'm Asian that I'm good at math. And this is really hard for me, and I can't, even when I raise my hand, I can't get the support I need. And in the middle of this focus group with 30 kids in a classroom, she burst into tears. You know, and I'm not blaming people. What I'm saying is we have to be awake. Wouldn't we? I mean, the goal is that every single student deserves a high-quality education. Every single student. Okay, so this is the outline for the website, which I'm excited. So, Jeanette, you want to? Oh, yeah, sorry. No, that's okay. I'm just caught up here with all this.
We all have our passion.
Yeah, we do. Okay, so, and you can hand this back to me. So this is, so there'd be a home page. Actually, this is the wrong one. Anyway, that's all right. I did another version of it. So we have the welcome, actually it's the purpose in the homepage. And then we have the Title III approved ESSA plan, the Title III accountability in Title I, the civil rights for English learners, the Title III spending handbook, required translation notifications. And these are all the frequently asked questions that I end up getting all the time. And I don't mind getting them. But, you know, the details of the WIDA assessment, we do have someone in the assessment department who is over WIDA. You know, that's Anne Michelle Neal. So it's better, the people who know the most about that field, they're the ones that you should go to for the questions. And I always try to include Anne Michelle. Same thing in relationship to students with disabilities. I always include the special ed department, right? Because that's what you want, because you're going to be held accountable for that with them. So I try to, you know, connect the people in the agency who are the best able to give you the best response. So I hope that works for you. I just want you to know that that's what I try to do. I don't say things that I'm not totally sure of, and I'm not the expert on. So that's why I put the FAQ for the WIDA assessment, which you could generate all kinds of questions, because you do have questions. But if, you know, you work together in teams, because we'll have some time, and just put down questions you want answered, would be really great. Frequently asked questions of English learners with special needs. This one is already established. It's a non-regulatory guidance that is really helpful. And it's with the work group, we studied this, and it's very, very helpful because it's based on ESSA. And it's it has the questions, frequently asked questions, and then it has the specific response, and then where it is in the statute. So it is really a good, and then the Title III toolkit. School fees, data reporting and funding, the support for students new to America, the biliteracy seal, and exemplary practices. So this is a rough outline. I'll try to put on here the one that I revised. This is the first one, and then I thought differently about it. But you want to work together and figure out what you really need on the website, like what do you want on the website, what kind of questions you want answered. Yes?
What's the Title III toolkit? Is that where all the forms will be?
No, the Title III toolkit, which I'm going to see if I can find it on here, is actually from the Office of Language Acquisition, and it's really excellent. Oh, okay. It's and also the quality instruction for English learners on the civil rights one in like 20 different languages that I've given out, but just given out in English, is really amazing. So we'd put links to all those things, so all the resources that you would need would be on our website. You wouldn't have to like go running around to find it. The language acquisition toolkit is really quite amazing. And then we would put things like the link to the one that we have at the UEN, which is about all refugee, so all the refugee resources.
Will there be a link for forms on here too? Then the forms.
Well, they would be there though. It wouldn't be a link. No, it would be on the website.
But okay, but on the what?
Yeah.
But under, is it going to be under one of these titles, or is that?
Well, it would be required translation notifications.
Okay.
Right, so it would be there.
All right.
But anything that you don't see that you want there, you should work together and put down there. And even on the back, if you have questions, all kinds of questions, that we could include in the frequently asked question, because it might be something else. So I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to work. Yeah.
I just have a suggestion. I think it would be easier to find, because I saw that, but when I'm looking for something, if you said forms on there, it'd just be easier. Sometimes.
Yeah, but then just put that there.
Okay.
Just put it in there.
All right.
Okay, so you have about 15 minutes to work with teams and what you really want to see on the website.
This is data reports for funding and reporting. Would that be the data gateway, or we can just add data gateway?
Just put data gateway. Well, we hope it's going to be on. Yeah, we hope it's going to be on the EL dashboard. Just put that.
just a link to that, you know?
Okay, so the other thing that's really important is when you're talking about the design of the web page, if there's something that you want, like accommodations for testing for ELs, you should put in there as a link, right? So testing, ELs, accommodations, then it would go directly to the special ed. You see, think about the things that you need so that you don't want to be running from one page to another. You just want to go to the Title III page and then just click on the link, and you want it to take you based on what you need. So, because I won't know that, you know, you have to figure it out. It has to be easy for you. I know that would be a novel idea, but... So do you have good suggestions? How much more time do you need? 5 more minutes? 10 more minutes? Are you done? Or why don't I give you 5 more minutes and then we'll wrap up. But you have to make sure that you give me, you have to give me all this feedback so when we design it and then I send it out to you again, you can say, does this work, does it not work? Yesterday when I was on the USBE website, I couldn't even find Title III. Like I was running around in federal programs and there was no link to Title III. I couldn't even get to Title III.
I know. I tried recently. I had to do a search.
Yeah, I had to do a search too to find Title III. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. The accountability and assessment booklet is that way too. It's hard, and they keep moving. It's crazy. So we need links to that. The links to what do the kids need for ACT to get the accommodations?
Oh, yeah.
So we've got that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I counselors, I was inundated with what do we need to have.
Okay, so you have about 5 more minutes, and then I'm gonna collect everything, and then we'll do a wrap up. I'm just going to say something about this last agenda because this framework is what the turnaround.
That's what we're using.
That's right.
UEPC. So when they do the appraisal, the results are
right.
Well, they're working with Weston.
Yes. Yeah, they are. See, I don't. Among other things. Okay, so is everyone finished with their suggestions? Yes? Because I don't want to keep you longer. So I'm just going to say one last thing. On the agenda, I included the 4 domains for rapid school improvement, the systems framework from the Center of the School Turnaround in West Ed. This is the framework that's being used with all the turnaround legislation and schools that are either priority schools or focus groups. And I don't know if you know that or are involved in that, but I think it's important. You can just go to the Center on Turnaround and put this in Google, and you can get their report to actually see the kind of research that supports the way in which you can support schools to make a change that's not like glacier-like, you know, something a little bit faster than the next 200 million years. So, because change is difficult, but these are really good examples. And anyone who's involved with the university's LIFT, professional development for leadership, how many of you are involved in that? I know some people are. Thank you. It's really valuable. And so the domains are leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and culture shift. So it's something that you could download and look at that would help you get a broader view, especially if you have schools that are underperforming in relationship to disaggregated groups, which based on state data, it's like, you know, everybody in relationship to English learners. So any last comments before we, and make sure that you give me your feedback on the web page. The person that I work with who does the web page is really wonderful. So any kind of feedback and ideas that you have, she's like incredibly open to. I probably won't be starting on this until, I don't really know. I don't know in relationship to the whole ESSA approval thing. I don't really know. But I can start putting things on there that aren't directly related. Because even though Title III is approved, remember the whole plan has to be approved. Right, so we're just kind of in a waiting pattern. Any other last questions or comments? You all are the best, best group on the planet to work with. I just want you to know. You ask great questions. You know, you're very honest and straightforward, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Take care. Enjoy yourself. And I'll see you in May, and by then, actually, I hope sooner. You know, we'll have the plan approved, and we'll have your budgets and the new system organized. So thanks.